Hi folks, welcome to another episode of the 59th Minute FPL podcast. I'm the FPL General, recording on the 14th of January 2020, looking ahead to Gameweek 23. So, a -4 was taken on Monday night. 3 transfers have been made. I don't think I've ever made 3 transfers this early in a week, so I will reveal those very soon. I won't leave you hanging until the end of the podcast. I'm going to just do the shout-outs first. A quick review of how Game Week 22 was for me. Then I'll tell you what transfers I made last night. And then the usual watch list update, questions from Twitter, and I'll finish with Game Week 23 captaincy. So first of all, first game of the weekend, I sat down to watch Sheffield United beat West Ham. And it was a great start for the podcast with David McGoldrick getting a 59th minute substitution. He was actually he turned out to be the only one at the weekend. So welcome to the club, Mr. McGoldrick, the guy who has had 36 goal attempts this season, 26 shots in the box, 15 big chances, 17 shots on target, 0 goals. So I hope for his sake that he finds the back of the net soon. We've seen Danny Ings do a big celebration at the weekend, taking his shirt off. I can't imagine what McGoldrick is going to do when he gets his first of the season. So I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully he can get that one soon. How did Game Week 22 go for me? It was another red arrow. So it's the third red arrow on the bounce. They're not huge red arrows, but they're still pretty frustrating at the same time. Finished on 58 points, so I went from 163k overall, dropped to 177k. So still not a terrible place to be, with a large chunk of the season still to go, a second wildcard to play, and all 3 chips still intact. So I'm still haven't given up hope of a top 10k, which is always my target going into any season. But as I mentioned earlier, in earlier episodes, I think a top 50k finish is an excellent rank in FPL nowadays. So if I can get to top 50k by Game Week 38, I'll be more than happy with that, especially after how awful last season was. The positives from the weekend for me: Rashford, De Bruyne, Salah and Trent got me points, as well as did Lundstrom, and I captained Vardy for his 5-pointer, so got 10 points from him. So not great, but at least it wasn't a blank. I don't think Vardy's blanked at all for me as captain this season. The negatives, blanks from Matt Ryan, Soyuncu. Soyuncu hasn't been great for me. I brought him in wildcard Game Week 20. He was superb first half of the season, but I haven't got an awful lot for him apart from that 8-pointer a couple of weeks ago. Brought in Madison as a possibly 2-week punt for Game Week 22. Every other player I considered, Martial, Richarlison, Mahrez, Sarr, every one of them delivered, and Madison, of course, got me 2 points. So he's already gone. I think he was in my team for about 2 days, and he's already been bombed out. A blank as well from Grealish, which to be expected against Manchester City. Pretty frustrating that he didn't take that penalty. So if he's not going to be on penalties, I don't think he's as attractive as he was. And I mean, he won't be attractive at all until he goes to the barber anyway. So a blank as well from Jimenez. So I think that's 3 blanks in a row for Jimenez now, and again another player who has left my team this week. So that gets me on to transfers. So as you know, if you follow me on Twitter or you're a long-time listener to the podcast, I'm a very boring manager, a very patient manager. I like to wait until Friday to make my transfers, to have all that information. This week is a rare case where I've moved early, simply because the 3 transfers I wanted to make, I had 0.0 million wriggle room, and it looked like a player was going to rise last night, which he did, so I was forced to move early, because if I had waited till today, I would have been priced out of those moves. So I've made a very tough decision to get rid of Rashford. He's been really good for me. Got him wildcard Game Week 20. Last 3 game weeks he's done really well for me. Outscored Abraham, who I replaced him with, and it's very hard to sell a player when they're coming off the back of a 12-pointer, but I'm a big believer in having a plan and sticking to it. And my plan, before Rashford got that 12-point haul, was to lose him for Sadio Mane with the double game week in mind. So Rashford's gone, as is Jimenez, and and Maddison as well. So Maddison, Jimenez and Rashford are the three who have left my squad. They've been replaced by Sadio Mane. So I've got my triple up now, Salah, Mane, Trent for the double game week. And Mane is most likely going to be my triple captain this season for that game week. Are you ready for it? Danny Ings has come in finally. A player who is on my injury prone list that I drew up at the start of the season. But I think it would be silly for me to be stubborn, for the rest of the season and avoid him, because he's hurting me week after week. And the man's on fire. He's having the best season of his life. Southampton have turned the corner. So Ings comes in. I like the fixtures long term for Southampton as well. So for me, it's a win-win with Danny Ings. I bring him in. If he keeps scoring, great. I get the points like everyone else. If he, climbs up the stairs tonight to bed and tweaks his hamstring on the way up the stairs, great as well. So for me, it's a win-win at this point. So yeah, I'm not going to be stubborn with Danny Ings. I've learned in seasons gone by, you can't be stubborn with players like that. So he's in finally, and hopefully he can keep that scoring run going now and stay fit. Of course, that's the big one. The final player, my enabler that allowed me to get Mane and Ings, is Neil Maupay, Brighton striker, who I've talked up a lot this season. I've got a soft spot for him. Had him earlier in the season. His form's not great, but I really like his fixtures short term. Aston Villa at home this weekend, which is arguably the best fixture in the league at the minute, given how Villa are defended. And then he's got Bournemouth, who are an absolute mess. So I've got high hopes for Maupay and Brighton over the next 2 game weeks, and hopefully he can do well on those two, and then I'll be happy enough to keep him a little bit longer there as well. So a lot of people were asking me, why did I not go Calvert-Lewin? Quite simply, cash reasons. If I moved maybe on Saturday night or Sunday night, I probably would have been able to afford Calvert-Lewin. I don't even know if I would have went for him over Maupay anyway. I really don't think there's much between those two guys. Maupay, if anything, might have better long-term fixtures, which might have swayed me in that way. So that's it. -4. Danny Ings, Maupay, and Sadio Mane are in. So I'm pretty happy with how my team looks now. I felt it was pretty low risk this week anyway, making early transfers. I know there's cup games midweek, but none of my players are involved in any of those. I've sold Rashford and Jimenez, who might be involved midweek. So, yeah, it was low risk. So hopefully nothing goes terribly wrong between now and the weekend. And again, if it does, I've got subs there anyway, who can come in. So hopefully owning Mane for the double game week, probably going to triple captain him, and owning Ings, who's been on fire recently, and Maupay, who's got two very good fixtures coming up. Hopefully all 3 of those guys will prove to be successful transfers. It's on paper, when you're selling very good assets like Maddison, Rashford and Jimenez, it doesn't look great on paper, but hopefully that plan will work out for me. The big one really is just to get Mane for that double game week, so hopefully he goes big. Moving on to the watch list update now. 5 players that I've added following game week 22. The first one is Roberto Firmino. Now, I've obviously got a triple up already with Liverpool, so I can't fit him in, but I think this guy deserves more attention than he's getting. With double game week 24 in mind, he got 9 points against Spurs, scored his 7th goal of the season, all of which have been away from Anfield, and we know the double game week, both games are away. 4 shots in the box, looking at some of the stats on Fantasy Football Hub this morning. 4 shots in the box for Firmino against Spurs. He was excellent in that game. So I think Firmino is a great option for the double game week if you can't quite stretch to maybe the Salah Mane double up. I think Firmino is a very viable option. I think we're going to see a lot more people go that way now after a very good performance against Spurs. And if he has a very good game week 23 against Manchester United, then there could be a bit of a Firmino bandwagon then for that double game week. So I think he's a great option. Not as good as Salah and Mane, but a nice alternative. Riyad Mahrez, I wish I brought him in instead of Maddison, obviously. 17 points. I was never really close to getting Mahrez, so I can't really be too angry about that one. He's played 90 minutes in 4 of the last 5 Manchester City fixtures. So with the form he's in, it's going to be very hard for Pep Guardiola to drop him. He's a great price for a Manchester City attacker. So he's on my watch list. I'm probably not going to get him, anytime soon, because I'm probably focusing on that Liverpool double game week. But if he keeps starting and he keeps banging in the goals and getting assists like he did at the weekend, we have to take notice there. So well done to anyone who got on him for that 17 pointer. I know I mentioned last week, I think it was the guys on the FPL podcast, they kind of got me thinking about Mahrez when I hadn't been thinking about him at all. But I went for Maddison because I watched the cup game against Aston Villa last week, and having watched 90 minutes of that, there was no way I was going to go for anyone else because I was just that impressed with Maddison. But again, that's an example of watching games can be your downfall as well. Maybe if I didn't watch that Leicester game, maybe I would have been more likely to go for a Mahrez or a Martial. In hindsight, as a 1 week punt, Maddison, he's not a very exciting 1 week punt. Whereas the likes of Martial, Richarlison, Mahrez, they probably have got higher ceilings. So I think that was a lesson for me there in terms of 1 week punts. Go for the more exciting, higher upside options. Another player added to the watch list, Brandon Williams, 4 million defender at Manchester United. He's kind of been on and off my watch list all season. Excellent against Norwich, 10 points. This guy, he's so good going forward. He's much more dynamic than Luke Shaw. I think he offers a lot more going forward. I hope, as a United fan, that he keeps his place. I hope Solskjaer gives him a run, between now and the end of the season. And that's what us FPL managers want as well. A 4 million Manchester United defender, even if it's just for your bench, to replace the likes of Rico and Kelly, who are not doing much for us. Again, looking at the stats this morning, Williams had 5 touches in the box against Norwich, and I think Andy Robertson was the only defender at the weekend who also had 5 touches in the box. Williams won the penalty as well, pure pace, getting himself in there, and he should have scored. I have no idea how he missed that chance at the end. So yeah, hopefully for us, he can keep his place long term. Another player back on my watch list again this season, John Fleck, 4.9 million, Sheffield United, 9 points against West Ham. Got himself the assist for McBurney's goal. Probably should have got himself on the score sheet as well. Just before that assist, he had 2 goal attempts. One was blocked. The other one just trickled wide. With a lot of the goal to aim for, he probably should have scored. I like this guy. I think himself and Cantwell are the standout options around the 5 million price tag in terms of budget midfielders. Fleck and Cantwell, they're probably not players you want to trust to start every week in your starting 11, but maybe in a rotation with someone. Maybe a rotation with a cheap defender or a cheap attacker or even another midfielder. I think Fleck is a really good option. He could actually even be better than Cantwell between now and the end of the season. I think if I was choosing between those two now, I would probably go for Fleck off the back of that performance at the weekend. Sheffield United do have, I think it's Arsenal and Manchester City next, so it's not the ideal time to get someone like Fleck or a second defender. So I think after that Manchester City game in Gameweek 25, that's the time you probably look at Fleck and maybe doubling up on the Sheffield United defence. Stats again, Fleck, 2 big chances created in that West Ham game. Final player added to the watch list this week, Abdoulaye Doucouré, Watford, 5.6 million. Last 3 game weeks, he has scored 6 points, 9 points and 14 points. So he's been very impressive, as have Watford since Pearson took over. He's been playing, much more advanced than he has been previously. He's playing right up there close to Troy Deeney in a number 10 role. And I think it really suits him, being closer to the goal. Again, I think there's a question about Watford later, so I'll come back to them, but I don't think there's too much between Doucouré and Sarr. If you're looking for a Watford midfielder, I think both of them, I would expect both of them to, score similarly over the next couple of game weeks. And, Doucouré is cheaper, so maybe that is the way to go. 5.6, that is a great price. I do think with Doucouré, there may be, I think I've seen a few tweets that there may be some kind of underlying injury that he's been carrying. I think I've seen a few quotes that he's unlikely to play in the cup this week. So just bear that in mind as well. Maybe that's a good enough reason to go for Sarr instead of Doucouré if he is carrying something there. Fixtures are a bit mixed for Watford. So again, I'm going to come back to Watford because someone asks what should we do there. 4 shots at the weekend for Doucouré in that game against Bournemouth. The players I removed from the watch list this week, very simple. Fabianski injured, Aubameyang suspended, Sigurdsson just playing quite deep, and I think I prefer Richarlison and even Calvert-Lewin as options from Everton, so I'm not interested in Sigurdsson anymore. Raheem Sterling as well, gone from the watch list, can't be there when he's, about 11.8 million, and he's played 1 minute over the last 2 game weeks. Very, very frustrating for people who own him. I think it's a case of the likes of Mahrez and these guys are just playing so well. It's very hard for Pep to fit Sterling in at the minute. Last couple of times I've seen Sterling play, he just hasn't been razor sharp in front of goal. I think it was the Manchester United Cup game that they destroyed us, and that quite a few very good chances, and he was fluffing everything. So surely he'll come back into the team at some point soon though. So that is the watch list boxed off for this game week. Moving on now to the Twitter questions. Thanks to everyone who sent them in. Some really good ones here, covering some of the main talking points. First one from Tor, who's flying very high in the world. Top 50, as far as I know. A Norwegian, of course. What do we do with Watford? Do we jump on them, and which ones? This is the big question. Watford, new manager bounce, have been excellent. 4 or 5 really good performances, loads of FPL points from defenders and attackers, but the fixtures are a little bit mixed. I'm just getting them up in front of me here. Next 5 for Watford are Spurs, Aston Villa, Everton, Brighton and Manchester United, so it is a bit mixed there. For me, I'm not in a rush to get any Watford players, but it's mainly because I'm quite happy with how my squad is set up now. Maybe if Grealish disappoints for another week or two, I may look at possibly Sarr or Doucouré for that fourth midfield spot in my team. I think the best 5 options from Watford are Foster, Cathcart as a cheap defender who's going to play every week, Sarr and Doucouré, who I've mentioned, and Deeney's an option as well. I've got a personal hatred toward Deeney. I must have owned him at some point, and he annoyed me, so that's why he's not even on my watch list. But he is a decent option. He's playing every week. He's scoring goals. He's creating chances as well. So don't avoid Deeney just because I am. But I do favour the likes of Sarr and Doucouré as midfielders at cheaper prices there as well. So for me, I'm not in a rush to get Watford. I think bringing them in is fine. You probably don't want to have 2 of them in your starting 11, though. I think 1 is fine, whether it's Deeney, Sarr, the goalkeeper, Cathcart. These guys are all fine. Cathcart is a good option, if you're like me and you're getting fed up of Rico and Kelly. If you've got 0.1 or 0.2 to spare, I think Cathcart is a really good replacement there, just to have on your bench, and you can play him in some of the decent fixtures then as well. Question from Martin. Martin is asking, should he hold on to Sterling for one more game week? So very frustrating for anyone who's had Sterling the last 2 weeks. Will he come back into the starting 11 at home to Crystal Palace this weekend? Who knows? It's Pep Guardiola. Maybe he'll just stick with the form players, the likes of Mahrez. I think Bernardo Silva was on the bench as well. So that, there's just so much competition there in that City attack, which just puts me off them. What would I do if I owned Sterling? I think, given the disappointment of the last 2 game weeks and the fact that it's a very good fixture against Crystal Palace this weekend, I would probably give him one more and hope he starts, because if he does start, there's a good chance of a healthy return there, and patience could be rewarded. But on the other hand, I wouldn't stop anyone from selling him either. A player who costs you 12 million and doesn't start for 2 game weeks in a row. But for me, I think I would give him one more, and then obviously if he doesn't play or gets reduced minutes, it's an easy sell then the following game week. Question from FPL Rossoneri. Fabianski replacements. I think a lot of people are going to be looking for a replacement. Very unlucky for people who brought him in with double game week 24 in mind. It must have been an absolute nightmare watching that game and taking that goal kick and going down injured. Forces yourself into a transfer that you didn't want to have to make this week. Who are the best replacements? I think the best goalkeeper is Henderson between now and the end of the season, in terms of what he's done already this season and the fixtures. I've got Matt Ryan. I'm happy enough to keep him, but if I was getting a new keeper this week, it probably would be Henderson. Even though the next 2 fixtures are tricky, I wouldn't worry too much about those. I would look at it as a long-term move, and over the course, between now and game week 38, I would fancy Henderson to get you plenty of points. I've mentioned Foster. I think he's worth considering as well. And you know what? Possibly the best option might be McCarthy at Southampton, just simply to save cash. There is, this season and most seasons, there's, when you look at the points for goalkeepers at the end of the season, there's not much between them. So there's always a case to be made for just spending the minimum amount on goalkeepers there. So you could have a 4 million goalkeeper on your bench, and you could have McCarthy at 4.3, so you're only spending 8.3 million on that position. And Southampton are not the team they were first half of the season. Look at the stats, look at the eye test. They played Leicester off the park at the weekend. So defensively, I think you can trust McCarthy now. He should get you plenty of save points as well. So I would be very tempted to go that way instead of Henderson, because I think that probably saves you about 0.6 million. And that 0.6 could be very, very handy in other areas of your squad. So I think it's a choice between probably Henderson or McCarthy if you want to just spend the minimum there and use it elsewhere. Question from FPL Dempsey, a Twitter account dedicated to FPL legend Clint Dempsey. People like me who've been playing for a long time will have fond memories of him playing for Fulham and Spurs. What to do with Jimenez/Traore, asks Clint Dempsey. So I've sold Jimenez, so there's your answer. I think it's fine to sell the Wolves guys now. Southampton next, then it's a tough run. It's Liverpool, Manchester United and Leicester in the next three. So I think if ever there was a time to sell Jimenez or Traore, it's probably before the Liverpool game. But I was comfortable enough selling Jimenez before the Southampton game because of how much Southampton have improved defensively. I don't see Jimenez going out and getting a brace against that game. I don't ever see Jimenez going out and getting a brace. He's consistent, but he's never really explosive. And he is on 3 blanks as well. So I'm happy enough to I could have kept Jimenez and got Ings the following week. Switching Jimenez for Ings for Gameweek 24, but I asked myself, who would I rather own for that Southampton Wolves fixture this weekend? And it's Danny Ings. He's the guy on form. He's the guy I expect to score more points in that fixture. So that's why I've made the switch a week earlier than I planned. I was planning Jimenez to Ings anyway, Gameweek 24, but I was happy to move that a week forward, given how Ings is playing and how Southampton are much better defensively. So I think selling them is fine. Selling Traore is probably easier than selling Jimenez because he's been disappointing. The reason I didn't get Traore at any point this season is I never trusted him as a fourth midfielder, and he's kind of that he's that awkward price around 5.5 or whatever he is now that you feel like he's too expensive to be on your bench as well. So it's just that awkward price point. That's why I stayed away. I'd rather spend a little bit extra. In my case, I've got Grealish in my fourth midfield spot. And I don't want 5.6 million sitting on my bench most weeks either. So I think selling Traore is fine as well. But I think in the case of these two, Jimenez and Traore, you can give them the Southampton game and then maybe selling them before a Liverpool fixture. It probably makes more sense. Question from Salah Mohammed. Why are you triple captain Mane over me in double game week? Now that's not the question. I'm sure this is not the Salah Mohammed. Salah asks, who are the best 3 forwards for the next 4 to 6 game weeks? Good question. I still think Vardy is up there in the top 3. I think Danny Ings has to be up there in the top 3, and the third one I would probably say Rashford, even though I've just sold him. Given his recent form, I expect him to continue to score well, but I just hope the trio that I've brought in will outscore the trio that I've sold. So yeah, I think Ings, Vardy, Rashford is probably the ideal front 3 for the next couple of game weeks. But there's loads of options up front. Good question here from Dave. Which of the principles that you had at the beginning of the season are you rethinking, apart from Danny Ings? So I typed out an A4 sheet of paper in August before the season kicked off, and I'm going to read through it now. I've got it here beside me, and which principles am I rethinking? I'm not really rethinking any of them for this season, apart from just reclassifying Danny Ings as a fully fit player as opposed to an injury prone player. But part of me, I've mentioned this to a few people over the last couple of weeks as well. The way I play the game, it's very patient, it's very boring, and I'm kind of getting a bit bored of it myself, to be honest. I feel like having an experimental season next year where I just inject a bit more excitement into how I play the game. Maybe be a bit more aggressive. Make earlier transfers. Maybe take a few more points hits. Maybe a few more differentials here and there as well, because it's just boring. It's boring waiting around until Friday to make your moves. I think a big driving factor in this for me as well is price changes. Over the last 2 or 3 seasons, price changes have gone nuts. Because there's so many people playing the game, you're almost forced to make your moves sometimes on a Saturday night or a Sunday. I see a lot more people making Saturday night transfers and Sunday night transfers now than ever before, and you can see why, because If a player scores a brace or a hat-trick at the weekend, there's a good chance they're going to rise 0.2 or 0.3 before the weekend. And over the course of the season, your team value just, it's nowhere near the others. I think my team value is only probably around 104. There's probably people around 108, 109 who obviously can afford, more expensive players than I can. But quite simply, I like to have an overall strategy for the season and stick to it. So I'm gonna stick to this one for this season. I'll see how things finish up. I'll see where my rank is at the end of the season, and I'll always assess the season then during the summer, and then decide how I want to approach the next season. So I think there's a good chance next year I might spice things up just for myself more than anything, and just I've been playing the same way probably for 4 or 5 years, which obviously had a couple of very good seasons, but last season was a bad one, and there's no guarantee that this one is going to be a very good one. So probably that probably depends on next season. Probably depends on what happens to me this season. If I get maybe a top 50k, maybe I'll be more likely to stick to what I'm doing. But if I get 100k, 150k, or God forbid worse than that, maybe I'll change things up next year just for a bit more excitement, and more than anything as an experiment, just to go against move out of my comfort zone and try something different and just see how it goes. At the end of the day, it's only one season. See how it goes. If it's an absolute disaster, just go back to playing the way I normally play, and if it's great, then I've got a decision to make. Do I change my approach because the game's changing? Do I need to change my approach in terms of earlier transfers and stuff like that? So just to read out this is very short. This is bullet points on an A4 sheet of paper that I keep close to my desktop whenever I'm making FPL decisions. So at the top it says FPL 2019-20 overall strategy. And my overall strategy is minimize transfers. So I like to make as few transfers as possible, and these bullet points help me to do so. So number 1, have a plan and stick to it. Number 2, avoid bandwagons. Avoid injury-prone players, make a list. No transfers until Friday night unless I have 0.0 million for the moves. There's a good example this week. I moved early because I had 0.0 million to make them. Don't worry about team value. Identify captain picks a few weeks in advance. Have a core group of players and trust them long term. Focus on the top teams, 3 times City / 3 times Liverpool, for example. So I've got 3 Liverpool now. It's been a case this season where 3 City didn't make much sense with all the rotation and form and stuff like that. Next bullet point, don't let fear rule your transfer decisions. We can't have them all. So a good example there is Rashford. I sold Rashford this week. If I let fear rule me, I wouldn't have sold him. I would have kept him because I'm fearful just because he's got me 12 points. I don't want to sell him. So that's a good example there, not letting fear rule my decisions. Eye test number 1, backed up by stats number 2. Be open to a new approach with the chips. Don't be afraid of hits if they drastically improve your squad. Bank a transfer as often as possible. And then I've got 3 separate bullet points at the bottom here for making transfers. So when making a transfer, refer to this checklist. Number 1, have I given the player enough time to deliver? Number 2, is the new player injury prone? And number 3, is there any chance the new player could be rotated? So that just gives you an idea of how I'm playing the game this season. And I'm going to stick to it because the first bullet point is have a plan and stick to it. So I want to stick to my 2019-20 strategy that I set up for myself at the start of the season, and then I'll reassess things during the summer, and maybe I'll be typing up a new strategy for 2020-21 season, and it could be quite different to that one there. So that's important. I think it's important to have a plan and see it through, and then I'll reassess in the summertime. So good question there, David. Thank you for that. So Gameweek 23 captaincy. I don't know what I'm going to do myself yet. I'm probably between Vardy away to Burnley and Kevin De Bruyne at home to Crystal Palace. Most likely, the manager I'm boring. I'll stick to Jamie Vardy. He hasn't let me down in terms of he hasn't blanked at any point when I've captained him this season. Burnley have been very poor this year as well, so I would fancy Vardy to do well in that fixture. De Bruyne would probably be my vice captain there. I think anyone who has Aguero or Mahrez, you're going to be tempted to captain those guys in that Crystal Palace fixture. Salah and Mane are always options as well, even though it's against Manchester United. I'm a United fan, and I'm not looking forward to that game. I don't see us getting anything there, so that's another reason why I was quite comfortable letting. Well, I won't say I was comfortable letting Rashford go because that's not the right word to use, but I found I didn't mind losing him when it's Liverpool next, because Liverpool, what are they, 6 clean sheets on the bounce now, I wouldn't be surprised if they kept a clean sheet against us. So would I rather own Mane or Rashford for that fixture? And the answer for me is Mane there. My new guy, Mopai, home to Aston Villa, there's always a temptation there to play the captaincy. His form's not good though, so you probably can't do that. If I was someone who wasn't on Twitter, and wasn't on a podcast, maybe I'd be more likely to do that. Danny Ings as well. Don't worry, I'm not going to do it. I think owning him is enough for me. I think if I captained him the first week I owned him, you're guaranteed that's when he will blank. So I won't do that, and I'll hopefully we'll get points from him against Wolves. So for me, I think it's going to be Vardy most likely. De Bruyne might wrestle it off him before the weekend, but I think it will be Vardy. I think that's everything covered ahead of Game Week 23. There's lots of content on Patreon this week. One of my New Year's resolutions is to up my levels of content on there. There's already eye test podcasts for the Sheffield United game on Friday, as well as the games on Saturday, the Liverpool game and the Arsenal game. I'll be recording another eye test podcast on Wednesday because I'm going to watch the Manchester City game and the Watford game from the weekend. I'm particularly interested in watching that Watford game, and I'll be recording eye test pods for that. So what they are is basically 10-minute podcasts, maybe 15-minute podcasts on each game. Just my thoughts, having watched it for 90 minutes, and then looking at the stats as well and throwing some stats into it, and kind of comparing stats versus eye test. I always record a Patreon podcast on Friday as well, taking questions from patrons and running through press conferences and my final captaincy decisions and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to check all that out, you'll find the link on my Twitter account or on my Instagram account there as well at FPL General, or you can just Google patreon.com/FPL General. Any questions you have about that content, just let me know. All of those podcasts are available for just around £2.50 a month. So stick your hand down the back of the sofa, find $2.50 and sign up. Good luck in Game Week 23. I'll be back next week. It's a midweek round of fixtures, Game Week 24, kicking off on Tuesday evening. So rather than recording next Tuesday, I will try to record on Monday morning instead to give you extra time to get the podcast listened to. So thanks as always for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please do give it a like, a retweet, a share. Leave a comment if you're on YouTube. Leave a review if you're on iTunes. It really helps me to get the podcast out there a little bit more. So good luck in Game Week 23, folks, and I will talk to you all next week.